At 23:13 hours on November 13th, the sky over Orel ripped open in a flash of white. Power stations erupted into fireballs. Communication grids collapsed. The city was plunged into darkness before its citizens could comprehend the strike. The true alarm wasn't the blast, but the location, a region Moscow's defense planning had marked as untouchable. When a single strike can neutralize an energy hub, sever command, and black out a city in moments, a shift in this global conflict is undeniable. This was no mere attack. It was a declaration, a strategic message about the changing nature of this warfare. It signals a new brutal phase in the war, a turning point that could redefine the entire theater of operations. The critical question emerges now. What weapon did Ukraine unleash that so completely stunned the Russian military? And how did it breach a protected zone without interception? On the night of November 13th, Ukraine turned a new page in this war, executing its most potent long-range strike against Russian territory to date. The operation was significant, marking the first confirmed combat use of Ukraine's domestic cruise missiles Flamingo Bars and Luch. These new defense systems fundamentally alter Kiev's ability to project power far beyond the front lines. The attack commenced just after dusk. Radar screens across multiple sectors painted a chilling picture. Multiple contacts flying in tight formation, closing on targets previously considered safe. The attack focused on high-value military infrastructure in Crimea and the occupied territories of Zaporizhia. Command centers coordinating Russian troops were hit without warning. Simultaneously, fuel depots that supplied the army on the southern front ignited, casting massive fireballs into the night sky. A military airfield, a known hub for drone operations, was struck. The complex burned for hours, a funeral pyre of expensive warfighting equipment. This military update was clear Ukraine wasn't just inflicting damage. The objective was to dismantle the entire support network for Russia's offensive operations. The strike on the Orel power plant delivered the most dramatic visual, a massive flash visible for miles. The explosion severed electricity to adjacent zones. Emergency crews were forced to operate in absolute darkness. Field reports confirmed a total loss of communications as power lines failed, halting industrial activity. The swiftness of the blackout shocked observers. Orel was meant to be a rear echelon sanctuary far from the war's sharp edge. These events proved Ukraine has entered a new era of long-range warfare, wielding modern weapons engineered for deep precision strikes. Next, the reaction of Russia's air defense reveals just how these missiles challenge their once-vaunted defense systems. The November 13th strike did not end at Orel. The assault cascaded across Crimea and occupied Zaporizhia, turning the southern theater into a synchronized chain of detonations. The expansion was critical. Ukraine's objective was to sever every link in Russia's combat power chain from the Navy to the Air Force. This wave of strikes moved with the cold precision of a special forces operation conducted deep behind enemy lines. As the first missiles broke the coastline, Russian units scrambled blind to where the next impact would land. Crimea absorbed the initial shockwave. The Ukrainian missiles came in low sea skimming. Their flight path caused radar screens to flicker, operators struggling to acquire a solid track on the incoming threat. Seconds later, the command center coordinating all Russian military movements on the peninsula went dark. The compound was illuminated by the stark strobing light of explosions. The percussive blasts collapsed several structures inside the perimeter. Russian officers were forced to fall back to hardened secondary bunkers. Later war analysis confirmed the strike severed critical communication lines. These were the same lines used by soldiers positioned near the critical hubs of Melitopol and Tokmak. Fuel storage became the next priority target. Ukrainian planners aimed to choke the supply lines for every armored vehicle on the southern axis. At one major depot, flames tore hundreds of feet into the air. The Crimean sky burned red. Trucks, now silent hulks, were abandoned as their crews fled. Overhead satellite sensors captured the devastation. The images showed the charred skeletons of dozens of containers. Without that fuel, the momentum of Russian warfare stalled. Convoys slowed, awaiting supplies from distant depots. Zaporizhia mirrored the chaos. Missiles slammed into the earth near airfields, the nerve centers for Russia's drones. At one specific location, the attack was surgical. Fire tore across the tarmac, consuming UAV assembly equipment. Maintenance tents collapsed, their frames melting into slag. A critical Air Force asset was incinerated. Technicians evacuated as a column of black smoke scarred the coastline. For Russian commanders, the military update was grim. One of their most vital support bases had been neutralized. The damage forced the immediate delay of planned drone launches, blunting Russia's ability to strike Ukrainian cities the next morning. The speed and coordination of these attacks revealed a new battlefield doctrine, a strategic mindset focused on a single objective: breaking the enemy's momentum. Coming up, the total collapse of Russia's air defense, a war analysis revealing how these new weapons slice through territory, once believed to be impenetrable. Russia's air defense systems failed during the November 13th strike. They were not prepared for fast, low-flying cruise missiles. The failure exposed fatal weaknesses in a network Moscow has advertised for years. This is critical because the S-400 and Panzer defense systems are their best. They are designed to protect the most critical regions. Yet both faltered against Ukraine's modern weapons. The first problem began with the missile's approach. Ukrainian planners scripted a low-altitude attack route. The weapons hugged the terrain, denying Russian radar a clean track on the incoming threat. Radar systems perform best against high-altitude targets on predictable paths. This was the opposite, a calculated exploitation of their defensive posture. The low-altitude flight rendered the missiles nearly invisible. Residents in Orel reported a brilliant flash followed instantly by impact. There was no warning. The military news confirmed the missiles flew through a massive gap in early warning coverage. The second issue was velocity. Older drones gave Russian operators precious minutes to respond. These new weapons compressed that decision cycle to mere seconds, forcing impossible choices upon the soldiers. Several units were fatally late in activating their interceptors. Local footage showed flaming debris raining down on Orel, the fragments of a failed last-second defense. Analysts believe the interception occurred only after the missile had already struck its target. The third factor, a complete system overload. Ukraine launched multiple missiles across 3 regions simultaneously. This forced Russian defenders to divide their focus between Crimea, Zaporizhia, and Orel. Air defense networks are most effective when they can concentrate on a limited number of threats. This multi-pronged assault saturated their capabilities. It shattered their ability to coordinate an effective response. The global conflict had a new reality. Russia's air defense structure could not adapt. It was broken by Ukraine's new long-range capabilities. Coming up, the technical features of the Flamingo missile explain why this piece of defense technology has become one of the most disruptive weapons introduced in this war. The Flamingo missile is a strategic game-changer, giving Ukraine a long-range strike option. It can reach deep inside Russian territory. This range shifts the strategic balance in a way Moscow never anticipated. Ukrainian officials confirmed a range of up to 3,000 kilometers. This means major Russian military command centers and cities are now within striking distance. This strategic reach is paramount. It allows Ukrainian troops to hold command center storage depots and industrial hubs at risk. Areas previously considered safe are now vulnerable. The missile's significance is magnified by its warhead, a bunker-penetrating charge. It can tear through 10 meters of reinforced concrete. This ability makes it a direct threat to hardened underground facilities where the Russian army protects its leadership. These structures shield communication equipment and high command. A weapon that can reach those spaces applies direct pressure on decision-making inside the Kremlin. Engineers designed this warhead to survive sophisticated defenses, which is why it can strike deeply buried targets that older weapon systems could never damage. The Flamingo's advantage is its advanced guidance, a system engineered to stay low to evade detection. War analysis suggests a combination of methods. It fuses multiple navigation inputs to follow the terrain moving through shadows in radar coverage. This tactical edge explains why so many Russian defense systems were blind until the moment of impact. When one of these modern weapons can hug the Earth maintaining a steady course to its target, it forces defenders into last-second reactions, drastically cutting the probability of a successful intercept. Together, these features prove why the Flamingo reshapes the strategic landscape of this war. Coming up, the strike pattern reveals this was not a mere test of new defense technology, but a direct message to Russia's military command hierarchy. This operation struck at the heart of Russia's battlefield leadership. The strategy weakened command posts, slow offensive planning, and sow chaos among frontline troops. In modern warfare, secure communications are the lifeblood of an army. Striking the officers who control, those links can paralyze operations across an entire sector. Ukrainian officials confirmed the strikes targeted specific command nodes. This shows the mission was surgical, designed to cripple decision-making, not just damage infrastructure. The forward headquarters of the 5th Combined Arms Army was a primary target in the attack. This command center is the nerve center for Russian formations along the southern axis. Losing it at a critical juncture forced local units to operate with degraded guidance, a fatal flaw in a global conflict. Intelligence from the region noted the evacuation of several officers post-strike. Analysts believe this forced relocation, crippled Russia's ability to coordinate reinforcements. Ukraine also hit the forward post of the 127th Motorized Rifle Division, and the damage to this site severed its communication lines during active combat. Fuel storage became the next key target, as Russian armored warfare depends on these lifelines to maintain pressure. The strike on a depot near Berdyansk choked the supply of fuel for transport and support vehicles. This shortage crippled mobility, making it harder for Russian soldiers to redeploy or shift equipment. When command and logistics fail at the same time, the entire front becomes unstable. These attacks proved Ukraine was not just striking deep, but was systematically dismantling the leadership structure that directs the Russian military. Coming up, the reaction within Russia's civilian administration reveals just how unprepared the state was for such a coordinated blow. The civilian response on the night of the strike exposed a government unprepared for a large-scale attack. This weakness was laid bare when local officials failed to provide even basic protection. This failure is significant. A state that pours resources into its military power is expected to maintain a minimal shelter system for its people. Yet the reaction from regional leaders showed a catastrophic lack of planning. The lights went out in Orel. Explosions echoed across the city. The instructions given to residents exposed the absolute limits of Russia's civil defense network. Governor Andrei Klitschko told citizens to shelter in rooms with solid walls. He suggested hallways, bathrooms, or closets as their only protection. The advice was a shock to many. It raised stark questions. Why did a city of more than 500,000 have no organized shelter plans? This latest military update confirms what analysts have noted for years. Russia promoted its military might while neglecting the defense of its own civilians. The events in Orel made this imbalance visible. Families had nowhere to go as drones and missiles passed overhead. The lack of preparation intensified when emergency services struggled to restore order. Local channels filled with reports of confusion as police and firefighters received conflicting instructions. Power grids went down for hours. Communication towers fell silent. For the residents, these failures amplified the growing sense of dread. For a populace already reeling from the suddenness of the strike, the notion that a core Russian territory could be left adrift without clear direction shattered the state narrative of an impenetrable homeland. Public opinion shifted as citizens grasped a harsh reality. Their safety rested not on planned defense, but on improvisation, rather than a professional response from their troops. This jarring contrast between the Kremlin's projection of military might and the vulnerability of its civil defense intensified pressure on the leadership to account for the glaring absence of a robust defense system. Next, the response from state media personalities reveals a desperate attempt to manage perception and deflect from critical failures. The state media's reaction to this global conflict event was telling. It exposed how propagandists scrambled to control the story, their actions betraying a rising tide of anxiety within the Kremlin's core. This is critical. State television is the primary tool for shaping public perception. When its most prominent voices betray fear, it signals fractures deep within the political structure. In the immediate aftermath, state-controlled airwaves crackled with aggression. Prominent commentators used bellicose rhetoric, a clear effort to obscure the true extent of the damage. Vladimir Solovyov, a key figure in the state media apparatus, publicly demanded extreme actions against Ukraine. His calls for sweeping retaliation echoing across a live broadcast. War analysis experts noted a distinct tonal shift from detached confidence to raw hostility. This change indicated that the drone strike had fractured the leadership's carefully crafted image of control. Another presenter escalated the rhetoric, invoking nuclear-capable modern weapons like the Poseidon torpedo. The threat was unambiguous, entire regions could be erased. Yet these apocalyptic declarations stood in stark contrast to the chaotic reality on the ground. While the state struggled with basic civil defense, its media mouthpieces projected ultimate power. The audience saw the disconnect. The same figures preaching strength were now lashing out with emotion. The credibility of their message crumbled. This was not a projection of strength, but a desperate distraction from the operational failures in Orel. The tension became surreal. Footage emerged of a state television host berating a robotics engineer on a defense technology program, all because a demonstration robot malfunctioned. The outburst was a snapshot of the immense stress fracturing the propaganda machine. The anger was not about a technical glitch. It was a symptom of systemic frustration. Next, we examine the internal economic pressures fueling this escalating volatility in modern warfare. Ukraine answered Russia's massive drone assault with a counterstrike. This felt less like a political message and more like a battlefield operation unfolding deep inside. Enemy territory. This military update was significant. Kyiv wanted Moscow to feel the same pressure its own cities had. endured, and the response was executed with the cold precision of a coordinated raid by its soldiers. Hours after Russia launched 138 drones and an Iskander missile Ukrainian, forces prepared a strike package. It moved like a combat formation aimed at the heart of the Russian war machine. The first wave targeted energy sites in Orel, and the attack hit with the sudden force of a night raid. A blinding flash, then a shockwave that rolled across entire districts. This impact pushed entire neighborhoods into darkness. As smaller secondary explosions echoed through the streets, fire crews fought to reach the burning facility. The blackout severed critical communication links for Russian drone operators. Launch schedules were frozen. Several units were forced to stand down. Phase 2 began over Crimea. Ukrainian weapon systems flew nap of the earth, hugging the terrain to evade radar. The targeting was precise. The missiles struck facilities supporting Russia's long-range UAV campaign. At Kurovsky airfield, fire engulfed storage areas for preparing Shahed-type drones. Subsequent satellite imagery confirmed at least one hangar completely destroyed. Military news analysts suggested the strike would delay multiple UAV operations as essential tools and equipment needed to assemble the drones were housed within the obliterated facility. Simultaneously, in Zaporizhia, the attack targeted logistics and command infrastructure. Near Berdyansk, a fuel depot erupted, painting the horizon with columns of fire. The blast wave severed a key supply artery, forcing convoys onto longer, vulnerable roads. At the same time, the forward command post of a major Russian army formation went dark. All communications were lost. This disruption shattered command coordination in the heat of battle. Ukrainian commanders later confirmed the strategy strike logistics and communications, simultaneously forcing an entire front line of troops to hesitate. In modern warfare, a moment's hesitation is a fatal flaw. The true masterstroke, however, was the psychological strike carrying the war deep into the Russian heartland. Millions of civilians watched pillars of smoke climb from facilities once considered untouchable. Air raid sirens, silent for a generation, now screamed across previously safe cities. From balconies, crowds documented the chaos. Emergency crews scrambled below their movements, lacking central command. This global conflict had entered a grim new phase. The vectors of pressure had reversed. This was no mere retaliation. It was a synchronized military assault, a calculated counteroffensive, rather than a simple reprisal. Coming up, the fissures opening within Russia reveal why these battlefield-style strikes may shape this war more than any Kremlin decree. The Russian economy buckled. The damage to its energy nerve center sent shockwaves through its defense systems. It was a blow to an already strained infrastructure, constricting the resources available for Army and Navy military operations. The strategic implication is clear. Russia's warfare effort is fueled by oil revenue. These recent disruptions have severed a vital financial artery. The state's capacity to process crude oil was crippled. Earlier drone attacks were a warning. This was a calculated escalation using modern weapons. The new strikes compounded the damage, making recovery near impossible. International energy monitors reported a staggering figure: nearly 500 million barrels of Russian oil, adrift on tankers with no port of call. This logistical nightmare became a crippling financial burden as sanctions closed the markets. Damaged refineries choked its ability to process its own resources. Moscow was caught in a vice: soaring storage costs, plummeting income, and the insatiable demands of its soldiers. War analysis experts concluded this economic gap would only widen. Repairing these complex sites requires advanced defense technology that Russia can no longer easily import. The economic impact reached the home front. Power shortages from the attacks forced multiple regions to slow industrial activity. Production lines stalled, assembly shifts were cut, transportation hubs clogged as fuel supplies for the Air Force and other sectors dwindled. A quiet fury grew among a populace already squeezed by inflation and evaporating state support, a critical detail in any military news report. The lesson was brutal: energy infrastructure is a cornerstone of national stability. Continued degradation threatens Russia's very ability to sustain this long war. But economic pressure was just one front. Next, the internal rot, a crisis of security from within, challenging the Marines and other security forces. Russia's internal security apparatus began to fray. The nation was now fighting threats from beyond its borders and from within them. The new threat was its own citizenry. This trend laid bare the fragility of state control. For a nation deep in a military conflict, unity is paramount. Yet incidents of sabotage multiplied, driven not by ideology but by desperation for small rewards. In a bizarre turn, individuals were recruited by phone scammers to commit sabotage. These were not grand acts of warfare, but symptoms of profound economic despair. Case file: Leningrad Oblast. A woman promised a small payment, torches, an electrical relay. The charge: terrorism. The sentence: a long prison term. The pattern repeated in Irkutsk. Another youth, another fire. A transformer cabin incinerated a nearby gas station threatened. Local reports confirmed 38 homes were plunged into darkness. Families huddled around emergency generators fighting off the cold. The incident sent a shockwave through local communities. It was a stark lesson in vulnerability. A single point of failure in their defense could collapse the grid. Simultaneously, the information war escalated. Russian state television, the Kremlin's mouthpiece, went dark as hackers seized the airwaves. Across multiple regions, screens flickered broadcasting messages that shattered the state's narrative, a major concern for information security. Analysts noted the deeper impact, a corrosion of public trust. After a string of military setbacks, the official word from the military was already wearing thin. This digital rebellion only widened the cracks. These were not merely battlefield setbacks. They were tremors from within, revealing that internal instability may now be the most serious threat to the state's military cohesion. In the months to come, the impact of this single strike will resonate far beyond the front lines, forcing a recalculation from every side engaged in this war. Every commander must now rethink their next move. A single long-range operation exposed a critical vulnerability in Russian defense systems. The aftershocks will shape military planning and political debate across the continent. For Moscow, the message was brutally simple. The homeland is no longer a sanctuary. Key strategic zones are now within reach. This new reality may force the Kremlin to strip air defense assets from its forward-deployed troops, a dangerous gamble that could weaken the army's hold in the south. For Ukraine, the performance of these modern weapons marked a decisive military advantage. Kyiv has now entered a new phase of long-range warfare. This capability provides commanders with unprecedented options, allowing them to cripple Russia's logistics. The supply network is now vulnerable from multiple vectors. War analysis suggests the evolution of this defense technology will continue with improved variants on the horizon. These upgraded systems will hold new targets at risk, assets previously thought to be safe. Western governments are watching because this changes everything. A weapon that can travel thousands of kilometers reshapes the entire doctrine of deterrence in the region. This single military update confirmed the balance of power has shifted. It is a stark demonstration of how advanced weapons will define modern warfare. In response, Moscow may be forced to seek additional drones from its partners to regain the initiative. The specter of a wider global conflict looms. Escalation remains a constant danger, particularly if Moscow answers with asymmetric actions in the Black Sea or along the tense eastern border of the alliance. These developments prove the November strike was not a conclusion. It was a catalyst. Now each side must navigate a volatile and rapidly shifting strategic landscape. The events of November signaled a new chapter in this conflict. The warfare is no longer confined to the trenches. It now reaches deep into the heartlands of both nations. This strategic shift matters. Russia faces a bitter choice: pull back its defense systems to protect its cities or risk leaving its troops exposed. Ukraine, meanwhile, will continue to pressure military command hubs hundreds of miles away. Analysts anticipate increased Russian air patrols and urgent requests for foreign drones. They believe Kyiv's objective remains clear: sever the energy and logistics networks that fuel the invasion. The coming weeks will reveal Russia's capacity to adapt. Can it counter this new threat? Or will Ukraine's capabilities force the Kremlin into a defensive posture, fighting a war on its own territory? Western experts concur long-distance warfare will define this next stage. They note that the battle is no longer just for territory. It is now a contest of national morale and political stability. Thank you for watching this deep analysis of the ongoing global conflict. To stay ahead of major developments, subscribe and activate notifications. Every new strike, every shift in strategy writes the future of this war in real time. Post your intelligence in the comments section. We will see you in the next briefing.